Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our informational session on the proposed occupancy tax in Warren County. We are going to start out with checking out a few basics around what an occupancy tax is. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So for this webinar, we are going to focus primarily on the basics of occupancy tax legislation and the adoption process, as well as a little bit about the purpose of why local government and particularly in North Carolina levies an occupancy tax, what they do or can do with the revenue, and why Warren County is weighing this as an option. And I want to say that because we are not going to be focusing on details around implementation. We might touch on it just a little bit, but this webinar is not intended to be about directed towards host and how they implement the process and how collections will work. We will follow up if the occupancy tax is passed by the Board of Commissioners. We will follow up with more outreach and engagement around the actual implementation and collections process. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page about what an occupancy tax is. If there are transactions, accommodation transactions that are subject to state sales tax in North Carolina, those same transactions for accommodations would also be subject to occupancy tax in North Carolina. So occupancy taxes are on short-term rentals. If that's anything rented for less than 90 days, but there is an exception for a property that is rented less than 15 times a year. If it's rented less than 15 times a year, it's not subject to occupancy tax. If it's rented for longer consecutive, the stay is longer than 90 days for one consecutive day, then it's those rentals between 15 and 90 days. I want to be really clear that occupancy taxes are not property taxes. They are not levied on the property. They do not go with the property. So if someone is currently hosting or running an Airbnb out of their property, and then they decide to sell their property to another owner, that occupancy tax does not follow the property in the way that our property taxes follow the property. Occupancy taxes are for businesses. Short-term rentals are businesses of sort, and they stay only with that business. They are levied against, meaning they are paid by the occupant, by the renter. However, facilitators, rental agents, business owners who are engaged in renting these types of accommodations are responsible for making sure that those occupancy taxes get charged to the occupant and that the proper buttons are turned on or remitted, processes are in place to remit that revenue to the local government. This is very similar to state sales tax. If you are running a business in Warren County in the state of North Carolina, and you are legally required to collect sales tax on your goods, in this case on accommodations, then you are also, even though the person buying that item is responsible for paying the sales tax, you as the business owner are required to make sure it's being charged. So it's very similar to sales tax. There are a couple general statutes. If you want to take a screenshot of this or email me later to follow up on the specific statute, but occupancy tax is legal in North Carolina. North Carolina general statutes allow for local government to levy an occupancy tax. Warren County received the authority to levy an occupancy tax in 2023. Counties are allowed to go up to 8%. When we spoke with our representative about taking this through the General Assembly, we requested to be able to levy up to 5%. So not taking that full 8%. And we chose that because we looked at what the counties in our region were charging, and we wanted for our existing short-term rentals and any future short-term rentals to be competitive in the area. So Vance and Northampton counties, as well as Franklin, are at 6% in terms of our border counties, and Halifax, Mecklenburg, and Brunswick County, Virginia's are at 5%. So real quickly, I want to touch on some county goals that have gotten us to this point. We've actually been talking about occupancy tax at some level for years when it comes to tourism. But most recently, we have a few of our strategic plans that guide our work that are touching on our ability to grow tourism in the community. And so in our 2022 comprehensive development plan, we have a economic development goal around encouraging tourism. Our commissioner's strategic plan through 2024 has a goal of leveraging the best of our assets to attract, retain, and expand business. And if you see some of those strategies there at the bottom, this includes increasing our countywide tax base annually through economic development activities and creating a brand and marketing message that leverages our assets and targets, I have a typo there, targets desired markets for residential and business growth. And we have a guest in just a minute who's going to talk to us about how these dollars, the revenue from an occupancy tax, allow for counties to market themselves and to grow the tax base to support businesses in getting new business into the county. And then recently we adopted outdoor recreation economy strategic plan that also touches on occupancy tax. So we want to be able to increase our outdoor recreation and related small business revenue. Our goal is 5% annually. And this means certain strategies that we have. We want to extend our outdoor recreation season beyond May through September. We know, particularly with our lakes, that May through September, Memorial Day through Labor Day, is our main lake season. But in our work with local businesses, in particular those that are seasonal, they need to be able to extend their season beyond these months. It's a resiliency need, and of course, a profit-driven need, and ability to just stay alive and do business. They want to be able to have customers and rely on revenue coming in outside of that season. And in order to do that, we need to look at ways to bring more business into the county, not be so reliant on May through September. And of course, improving our own resident engagement in outdoor activities. How are we marketing to our own folks? How are we marketing our festivals? What's our plan? And we looked at needing to get a TDA, a Tourism Development Authority, passed to be able to really focus on tourism more than we've been able to do. Right now, tourism is a line item in our community and economic development budget. And most of our neighbors and a lot of folks across the state of North Carolina have departments dedicated to tourism. We will come back to how the revenue has to be spent. But before we get to our guest, I want to make sure we're on the same page that occupancy tax revenue has to be put back into the county for the purpose of promoting travel and tourism. 2/3 of our revenue has to be used to promote travel and tourism, and the other third has to be used for tourism-related expenditures, which can be capital, physical infrastructure-related expenditures if it ties to tourism. Also, we have to have a tourism development authority to govern the revenue. The local Board of Commissioners is responsible for passing the occupancy tax, and they are responsible for creating the TDA. However, once that happens, that TDA is an entity all on its own, and they are responsible for saying how the revenue is spent. We'll come back to that, answer any questions a little bit later. So for the time being, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I have asked Angela Allen, who has been with Granville County Tourism for 9 years, I think, Angela, something like that, and has won multiple awards for the work that she's done, state awards for the work that she's done with tourism in Granville County. And I've asked her to come and speak about just a few minutes about how Granville County uses their revenue and how they work with their TDA. And the reason is because I think it's important that we're all on the same page about why we're exploring an occupancy tax and what that can do for us. So I'll stop sharing, and Angela, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me this morning. And that picture you just posted takes me back years. I think that may have been one of the first awards we won for the county. So yeah, times have definitely changed since then. But I am very grateful just to share a little bit about what we do here in Granville County as far as the tourism development. And just like Charlotte was mentioning, 1/3 of our revenue that we get does go into expenditures. We use them as capital development. So this is where different entities can actually call upon us to have physical things that can help present or add to welcoming visitors into our area. And to kind of give you guys an idea of some of the projects that we've actually assisted with in that capital development slash tourism expenditures, we've actually did some additions to local parks in our areas, to our lakes in our areas. We've also, this particular year, we're actually working with the town of Butner. They're actually constructing a stage to go into their gazebo park because they have several events that they have on a yearly basis, but they would love to extend those type of events that they have. With the city of Creedmoor, we did a very simple project, which was just wayfinding signs. So they have a brand that's already established, but they wanted to be more welcoming because their main street is actually a major highway. So definitely giving them an excuse to stop and know where things are because they just constructed a brand new community center within the last 2 years. So they definitely want to be able to direct people to that area because they host all different types of activities and events. And then there is one that's interesting with the city of Oxford. We're actually helping them establish a branding initiative. So while, yes, you may not quote unquote physically see what their brand may be, you will in all the collateral that they use to market and promote themselves. So that kind of gives you the idea of what we would do with the 1/3 that concerns capital development or tourism expenditures. The remaining 2/3 is actually use a lot for anything that's related to tourism. So I will let you guys know as far as the breakdown generally in our particular budget. Of course, it pays for the salary of the person that is in that particular department, and key also with benefits and things of that nature. But then also it pays for services like us getting a yearly audit every year also of what we're expending those things on. It also goes into any travel that I'm doing to promote the community, conferences, all of that good stuff to bring those things back to Granville County. It also goes into special program that we have. We have a mini grant program. To explain that particular program, is strictly just used for advertising any major event or project that could potentially bring in visitors to our area. And to give you guys some ideas of the events and projects that we've actually helped do some marketing for, probably the biggest one is the North Carolina Hot Sauce Contest. And that has been around for a while. So we generally help them with their outside advertising for that particular event. Also, also, we've had some new events come along. Most recently, we have the Culture Fest, which literally just happened in this particular month. And it was started by a very small nonprofit group in our community that was looking to expand themselves. They got with the city of Oxford, and a couple of weeks ago, they actually had it on Main Street in downtown Oxford, which was the very first time they had the festival. I will say it definitely started off small, where they may have captured about 500 in attendance. But I am very happy to say, with the grant that they received from us, they reached numbers of 3,500 this year as far as attendance goes. Then there are certain projects that we do that will assist us in marketing and promotion. We got with our historical preservation group, and they have actually developed a whole new walking tour of downtown Oxford. And now it has a QR code that links to a website. So we were able to help them with the design and actually the production of that particular guide and things of that nature. Um, I could go on and on about all the different events that we have helped, but that literally kind of gives you a sense of what those funds go to. And just like Charlotte mentioned, of course, once you develop your board, it will be the ones that determine where these fundings go. For an example of how our particular board is uh, comprised, we actually have representation from the municipalities, economic development, Chamber of Commerce, and two of our hoteliers. So that kind of gives you a broad spectrum of who's represented and who's at the table when we're making these type of decisions, and it actually makes it very fair. I will actually honestly say that. Yeah, people may ask, well, but if the city of Creedmoor is asking for funding, how can that be fair? Because you've got the city of Oxford and the town of Butner right there to balance them all out, which is really good. And then from the economic development standpoint, and the Chamber of Commerce standpoint, you are covering larger businesses in your community and smaller businesses in your community. So I would probably just put out there that it makes it fair across the board when you have that type of representation on your board. And I'll be honest, across the state, those boards look so different from one another. And I've actually been complimented on the way our county set ours up to make it more of a fair choice when they're actually asking for funding.
Thank you, Angela. Can you give us an idea, and I'll open the floor up for questions as well. What's your annual budget, and has it grown over the years with the work
Yes.
that you've been doing?
Yes, very much so. Like literally, I definitely started off with a budget that was more so in the 200,000 range, but I am very proud and very glad to say we're probably looking at a budget for next year of $330,000. So yeah, it is definitely significantly gone up, and I will accredit that not only to our established hoteliers, but also our Airbnbs have also increased in our area too. So we are receiving that revenue from Verbo and all those other great people from third parties and things of that nature. Hmm?
And you also have a billboard on I-85 if you're
Yes.
leaving Durham heading into Granville County,
Yes.
so you're on I-85 North.
Yes, so we have dedicated funds within our budget that is just dedicated to marketing on a larger scale. And that is one of the things we were able to do. I'm very grateful. In the billboard world, it can be a little tricky how you get these billboards. But when I started first thing back in 2015, one of my hoteliers actually brought it to my attention that there was a billboard actually available coming out of Durham right before you cross Falls Lake on I-85. So it was a prime location. And I was actually able to negotiate with the billboard owner that we are the sole leasing for that billboard. So we get to have that billboard for the whole entire year. We just have to pay for every time we need to change the vinyl. And now I think we're up to changing it 6 times during the year just to make sure we're covering all the different events that are happening in the area. And this past year, we actually got a digital billboard. It is actually located on US 1 in Youngsville coming out of Wake County. And the good part about it, it is at a stoplight that is right at a charter academy, which we were so happy about. So we were actually able to negotiate 10 billboards with them this year, looking hopefully to that continuing. This month is actually my budget meeting. So I am literally in the middle of doing all the proposals from all the entities that we market with. We do a regional program also with our markets as far as local, or I should say regional newspapers and publications. So, including all the newspapers that are in the surrounding counties around us. And then we also do some advertising with some of the Wake County and Mecklenburg area too. So, we have a regional campaign and we usually put it out on a quarterly basis. It's ads that you will see in their papers and digitally also that actually just gives a very simple list of the events that are getting ready to come up for each particular quarter that we're advertising. Um, we also do advertising with visitnc.com. So that is our state tourism entity. We do a lot of different digital and definitely social media with them, and I will say that's been really gangbusters for us because we have done several projects with them where we were featured on their Facebook pages or their Instagram pages, and it went directly to our website, it went directly to the event that it was promoting, and we significantly saw attendance go up when we did advertising with them. So we try to make it as diverse as possible, doing some traditional marketing but also being able to do some things digitally and through social media to get the exposure that we need for our different events and overall just for the different things that we need recreational wise, wayfinding wise, like all the things that would make the experience more meaningful to the person that's visiting for the first time.
Great, thank you. And just a quick follow-up and then I'll open it up because I want people to be able to understand a little bit better about the cost of marketing because it ain't cheap. So for that billboard, for example, in 85 coming out of Durham County into Granville, can you tell us like
Sure.
what an annual lease looks like or
No
something?
worries. So we pay about $9,000 for that lease for a whole entire year. And then the vinyls themselves, we probably spend about 2,000 to 2,500 to change them each year. The billboard, the digital one, of course, is a lot easier because we don't have to do vinyl and all of that good stuff. But definitely being digital is around the same price, honestly. Sometimes if you do it in bulk, with the different advertisers, they'll give you a break, which I'm grateful ours does. And we work with two different companies to get the one that's printed and the one that's digital out too. So it is a lofty cost. And to add to that, when you're also doing print advertising and everything, even though we do a regional type of program and stuff that we do it for every season that comes up. So that's an automatic, probably around about $8,000 to $9,000 just in advertising to make sure we're constantly in people's frame of mind when you're thinking about Granville County. And I don't even want to talk about this, but I'll bring it up so you can get a bigger perspective. We recently were actually in the March edition of our state magazine. That is a concentrated effort, I'll be honest, to pitch ideas and pitch stories to them. But we were very grateful when we actually talked to the editor in chief. She was looking for history, genealogy, and I had the perfect person for her to interview. She came out last October and actually took a tour of Granville County the whole entire day. Like they were here to 6 o'clock that evening. But in either case, that story came out of it, and it was a general story about Mark Pace, who is the head of our North Carolina room at the Thornton Library. And I thought there was a wonderful opportunity for people to get some exposure to Granville County. And I actually asked to see if we could get a full page ad that went in addition to that particular article. That was automatically by itself, one time, 1 month, over $5,000. And I'm very grateful to my representative because it can be upwards to $10,000 depending on the region that you want to advertise. Because keep in mind, our state advertises not only here, but all across the country and some internationally. So she was able to whittle it down to like specific areas that we could have that ad in. So that got the cost down from us. But upwards, it can be almost to $10,000. So,
And because You exceeded my marketing budget with the first billboard. So I just
Yeah,
wanted to put it
yeah, yeah.
in
But there's so many,
perspective.
yeah, but there's so many options, you guys. Like I love, so like for instance, our local markets here, I do a lot of radio here. So I actually reach out to our local radio station, Next Door Radio, US 98.3. We also do advertising with WIZS every year. It may be consistent of you actually being on the programs itself. It may consistent, well, Next Door Radio, I actually have my own show on that one. So that was a wonderful opportunity. You can do digital ads with them on their websites, also doing those radio spots. So that's something less inexpensive, but it has a greater reach than you will ever know. Because what COVID really taught us all is that when we could not speak to the audiences outside of our communities, it was imperative to bring in the ones that live in your communities because they in turn can be your best ambassadors. And they're the ones that are commenting on your Facebook pages and your Instagrams and sharing and tagging people. So I will say that piece of tourism that a lot of people are talking in our communities and everything of that nature. We have to have a concentrated effort, not just to reach on the outside, but also to reach on the inside so our residents can be educated. So when a random person walks up to them in a festival that's never been there before, they can tell them about it. They
Mhm.
can tell them about the community because we're educating them. And those radio stations also reach outside of Granville County. So that's the imperative part to actually be able to do something local that also has a regional approach at the same time. So I will say that's an inexpensive way. Some of the publications that we actually do, we spend like $3,000. The programs that we did with Visit NC, now, they can shoot for the moon. I am not going to lie because they will do the bigger national publications all across the country. But let's be honest, we're Granville County. I'm not trying to reach somebody in California. So that is not my goal. But I have been able to do those smaller campaigns with them on Facebook and Instagram. And annually, we spend about 3,000 to 3,500 with Visit NC alone to be able to do some of that advertising. So it can be done on all levels. And I didn't start out this way. Let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I did I did not.
Well,
It has grown.
yeah, I appreciate you sharing, and I know you're gonna hop off. Does anyone, while Angela's here, have a question for her and how occupancy tax has supported their TDA and marketing work in Granville County? And I'm sure, Angela, I'll offer you up without even asking, but I'm sure you won't mind a follow-up, from some of the folks who are on this
No
call if
worries.
needed. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Feel free to hop off. We're just going to talk a little bit longer about the actual
Charlotte, Charlotte, I'm
Yes,
so sorry.
it's okay.
Angela, can you go about and tell us how public reception was to the idea? Can you go over that? I may have missed it if you
Now,
did.
I will
Or
be honest with
what
you.
tactics did you guys use?
No worries. Now it was already established when I started in 2015. So it was established, but it was unheard. That's so I found myself like literally, I'm just going to put it out there. I found myself literally being compared to the Chamber of Commerce because number one, my office is inside of the Chamber of Commerce. I actually rent a space from them. So people automatically had the confusion that I was automatically an employee of theirs, and hence they had to be a member of the chamber in order to get publicity and promotion through tourism. And I really had to educate people on what we were doing is that we're promoting all the types of businesses and events and attractions that can bring in visitors to our area. So my general mantra, and everybody will tell you in our community, is got to be open to the public and welcome to visitors. That's literally the criteria for it. But the thing that really took off for us, because when I came, there was no branding at all for Granville County as a whole, but let alone for tourism as a whole. So one of the first things that I actually did was put out a branding effort for us, and that's where we got the community involved, and that's where we got the buy-in, honestly, because they were a part of the press process. They were telling us the assets that they thought were very meaningful to them, that might be attractive, and we've even shocked some people that were here 20, 25 years who lived in Oxford and had no clue what Butner and Creedmoor had, and vice versa. So I will say that was a really well thought out process for us as far as establishing what our brand was, but also getting the buy-in from our community as a whole during that process. So you do constant education, Jennifer. It does not stop by any means. And particularly for Granville County, because we have so many new people that are coming in the area with new ideas and new businesses, new farms, all of that piece. So I am truly a soapbox, and generally that is my mantra everywhere that I go. It's like you got to be open to the public, and you got to be welcoming to visitors, and that's generally the criteria of where I say a lot of the things we get done.
And you have two hotels on your TDA board now,
Yes.
and so they get to have an input on how the revenue is spent, because a lot of it, I'm sure,
Yes.
is generated from their businesses. And
Yeah, all of
so,
it. All of our funds come from them. Mm.
yeah, and so I'm assuming, they feel that buy-in as well, because they understand in order to keep business going, to keep people renting rooms at their hotels,
Mhm.
the marketing has to be there. People have to know why they should visit, when they should visit, where they should visit,
Yes.
and that kind of thing. And we have, the state does not mandate totally what your TDA should be comprised of. And so we have just as you guys did, the ability to form your
Mhm.
board so that there is stakeholder engagement and buy-in across the board from people who would be direct beneficiary, not direct, they're not going to get checks, right? But
They're not going to
really,
checks. That, yeah, we have to make
like,
that very clear.
yeah, right, right,
Yeah, that
yeah.
was like a mishap. Literally, it happens every time my board changes over too, because particularly the municipalities have had new people in their roles and everything. And they'll ask me, but can I vote on this if I'm asking for this? I said, well, are you receiving a personal check to this? Because if you're not, then no, that is not a conflict. So it's definitely a totally educational piece for a lot of people to understand tourism and how the dollars work. But yeah, I would say that's the most important part that you guys have really got to consider is what that board looks like, honestly,
Mhm.
and how it represents across the board. Now, you don't always have to have everything represented, because I will say I have a subcommittee because an interest came up between our wedding venues and the vendors that are associated with weddings and special events. So we created a whole separate line item for them within our budget just to advertise them, because we're representing at any given time with that group 30 to 40 people within our community. So it wasn't wise for me to approach that like an event, because it is not just only an event that we do twice a year, but it's a networking, reference, referral, all of that type of program that we're trying to create with a whole subgroup of people who have a general interest in something, so they control the budget within that particular budget line item. So don't feel like you got to have everybody represented, just enough to that are represented that when you make those decisions and those choices, you feel like you've covered your bases. But then you can have specialty groups that pop up, and you can have designated parts of your budget that's just for them, that they can have their own separate committees for and be able to work within the tourism development and everything. So there are ways, but be very considerate of who you place on the board.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions for Angela? Okay, Angela, thank you. I think that has
Yeah.
been really helpful. We appreciate you giving us a few minutes of your time, and good work out there in Granville.
Thank you guys so much. And just to let you know, as far as the who works it, I am a one-woman show. So it's definitely doable, even if it's one person in that position. I would just make sure that you give them as much support as you possibly can. So even though they may be doing it one, I have a person who does our website, I have a person who does our public relations. Prayerfully, in my next budget, I'll have somebody helping with our social media. So I would definitely say if you do a one-person department, just make sure they have enough support around them.
I hear that. Thank you so much,
Mhm.
Angela.
Thank you guys so much for having me, and I'm definitely available. I'm sure Charlotte will share my information. I am more than happy to answer any questions. I don't know everything, but I can give a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you.
You
So
guys have a
again,
great one.
Have a good one. So again, wanted Angela to join us to share her perspective of the why, why are counties doing this? Why would we even be considering levying this type of tax? And it's to do the work that she's doing, right? I've had some businesses ask the question, or Airbnb host, short-term rental businesses ask, well, what do I get out of it? If I'm going to have to go into my settings and turn on the button, which is pretty much all you have to do. So it hopefully will be a very low lift for our folks who use the platforms like Airbnb and VRBO and that kind of thing. But what do I get in return? And it's the dedicated revenue that we have yet to really have a revenue source for. Dedicated resources to marketing the county with the idea that we will be bringing in new visitors. We will be marketing the county to our existing residents. There might be people who don't know that they can have their family come stay here in a very lovely, charming Airbnb in Warrenton or at the lake when they're visiting. So it's about generating the revenue for the resources to market and to grow our tourism efforts. So I'm going to reshare my slides. I have just a few more things to cover with you before we stop or open it up for questions. Just a quick recap. Occupancy tax is not a property tax. It is a tax very similar to sales tax, which short-term rentals should already be levying. To be legally compliant in the state of North Carolina, if you operate a short-term rental in North Carolina, you should already be charging sales tax. And so like sales tax is paid by the occupant, the occupancy tax would be paid by the occupant. So just to give you a overview, in the January 2024 report from the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, which the data is a little bit delayed because it takes time to see how things work holistically, but almost $326 million was generated by the 82 counties that had an occupancy tax in FY 21-22. And as you've seen in some of the information that we've posted so far, out of the 100 counties in North Carolina, 90 counties are legislatively enabled to collect an occupancy tax. What that means is Warren County is one of those. We are legislatively enabled as of last year to levy an occupancy tax, but we still have to pass it locally. So we are not currently collecting occupancy tax in Warren County. We're only legislatively enabled. 90 counties are, almost the entire state is doing this. You can see here at the bottom, the other counties that asked to be legislatively enabled and were given that authority at the same time as we were, Avery, Davidson, and Iredell counties, they are going to do up to 6%. Bertie is going to go up to 6%. Stokes up to 5%, Union 1, and Wilkes up to 6%. And just to give you a sense of what folks are doing, these are revenues from FY 22 for county occupancy tax rates. It's in $1,000. So basically the number you see here in the towards the right of each column, multiply that by $1,000 to see what that county generated in revenue for FY 22. So let's look at our neighbors. For example, Halifax, they have a 5% occupancy tax. They are doing over $1 million in revenue from their occupancy tax in FY 22. Granville, you just heard Angela talking about their revenue that funds her budget. She talked about growing it from, the 200,000s into the 300,000s. There are some counties, of course, that are much bigger than us, with lots more hotels, or maybe they're located at the beach, you know, for example, on the coast, if you look at what Dare County is doing, New Hanover County is doing, I mean, Dare County is bringing in 47 million, you know, in revenue. So lots of folks are funding their tourism work and their marketing work, bringing visitors into their community to stay in their hotels, to stay in their Airbnbs and their VRBOs. We talked earlier, a short-term rental is supplied to one person for less than 90 days. It is obviously a hotel or motel room, but it can be any residence or cottage or similar lodging facility. It can also be a houseboat, a tent, a yurt, a train caboose. It does not apply to a parking spot for RVs or campsites or that kind of thing. It also would not apply to camps or school programs that might have overnight lodging or a hospital stay in places that those folks would not be charged an occupancy tax. And it also would be applied to any fees that are associated with the accommodation. So for example, if you run a short-term rental and you have a late departure fee or a rental of an extra bed or something like that, a pet fee, all of that would be included in what the occupancy tax would then be levied against. So the state statutes say that retailers, facilitators, and rental agents are held liable for remitting the taxes. So if you operated a bed and breakfast and folks walk the door, they book the room through you, they pay you, you are a bed and breakfast operator, you are a retailer. But if you're operating your, if you have your home on Airbnb, VRBO, Verbo, those platforms actually will remit the occupancy tax to the local government on your behalf. You still have to go into your settings and toggle on, if this passed, toggle on that you are collecting occupancy tax. That is your responsibility. Just like you put in your tax ID number, just like you have sales tax on there, you just toggle it on. And again, this webinar isn't going to focus on implementation. We'll have follow up on that if this passes. And then rental agents who might oversee a property on their own, that they are legislatively responsible for remitting the taxes. We could, in theory, have penalties for delinquent occupancy taxes. The same things that is legal to do for delinquent sales taxes can apply to occupancy taxes according to state statute. And counties are allowed to enforce collection remedies for short-term rental operators that are not collecting the occupancy tax. Except for governments are not allowed to place liens on properties or foreclose on properties. Again, this is not a property tax. And so therefore the penalties and the collection remedies that might apply to properties do not apply for the occupancy tax. And as we said before, they're not subject to successor liability. If you sell your home, the occupancy tax does not go with it, unless, of course, the new owner is planning to have their own short-term rental accommodation service there. This is an example of something someone shared with me from a stay here. And I had a question about, it looks like we are currently charging occupancy taxes. So if you are someone who operates an Airbnb or a Vrbo right now and you see your guest receipt, you might see this phrase here, occupancy tax. We've had to look into this, contacted the Department of Revenue about this, as well as the School of Government. We are not collecting occupancy taxes. We have not enacted it yet. The Board of Commissioners has not approved it, even though we have legislative authority to do it. What has come back to us is that most likely Airbnb has the sales tax mislabeled, because if you notice, you have the nightly rent, the fees associated, and there's no sales tax here, but every business should be collecting sales tax in North Carolina. So what we have been told is that once, or if the occupancy tax passes and owners go in and toggle on different taxes that they have to turn on, you should see it all break out. And I have an example here. So this is a rental on Airbnb in Warren County. If you look here encircled in yellow, you can see this current taxes being collected are the state and local sales tax. We do not have an occupancy tax currently, so it is not being collected. But if you look at a listing in Halifax County, which does collect occupancy taxes, someone who rents a stay on Lake Gaston, but on the Halifax County side, they can hover over this taxes line item and see what taxes are being collected. So you can see that not only the state and local sales tax is being collected when you stay in Halifax County, but the occupancy tax is as well. So what are the next steps? We have presented this and discussed this in front of our Board of Commissioners multiple times. Our next step is to hold a public hearing. This video is being recorded in advance of our June 3rd, 2024 public hearing, in case someone's watching this after the fact for posterity's sake. So that public hearing will be coming up at 6 p.m. on June 3rd at the Armory Civic Center. If you have any questions leading up to it, you're welcome to call the county manager's office or the administration building, where our economic development office is located at 252-257-3115. But the commissioners will hold a public hearing on June 3rd. Then they will consider the resolution to levy the tax. If they choose to adopt the tax, collections will begin July 1st. Again, as you've heard us say, there is another step in order to spend the money. A separate resolution must be passed to establish the oversight board, which would be the Tourism Development Authority. We can collect the occupancy revenue before establishing the TDA, but no funds can be spent until that board is established, because they have the sole authority to say how the money can be spent. And then, of course, we're going to be working on designing materials and education information around collections and that type of thing. Because I think we'll all be learning together, and we want to make sure that everyone is on the same page about what's expected of them and how they go about communicating with the platform that they use. I'm going to share a couple of links with you at the end of this, and I can email them out or send them on if someone contacts me. But really, if you are a host on Airbnb, there is a section in your settings where you turn on that your county is collecting a 5% occupancy tax, and there are steps to walk you through how to do that. Just to give you a little bit more information, we do know that in 2022, Airbnb reported that county property owners in Warren County generated about $2.2 million in revenue in 2022. That's just on Airbnb. We know that other platforms are being used. We've heard some commentary about why do this if we don't have hotels, and it's true, we don't have hotels. We are lucky that we have a lot of folks who are willing to engage in these short-term rental platforms so that we can host visitors overnight and generate that revenue for our small businesses and for the folks who put their home up. They are operating a business. They are generating that revenue. And the idea is that we can put a 5%. So if you do that on that 2.2 million in 2022, that's a little over $100,000 that we could have collected in revenue in 2022 to put back into marketing and bring folks back into the county. We are allowed to retain a small percentage for administrative costs. There are going to be staff folks on the back end who are overseeing this and making sure it's flowing smoothly. Those can either be out of the tax office or out of the finance office. And our current conversation is around having our finance office oversee this process. And just a note that if the county passes the resolution, this would levy the occupancy tax on any short-term rental within the county. But the revenue would be solely with one county. Municipal governments can get their own authority to levy their own. A couple more points. What is a tourism related expenditure? It is any activity that is anticipated to increase the use of lodging facilities, meeting facilities, convention centers by attracting tourists or travelers. It can include capital expenditures, and you heard Angela talk about that a little earlier. So examples of things that might fall under that, advertising, as we've discussed, if one day we want a visitor center, more youth or sports facilities that bring in visitors, lake rescue patrol programs, more signage, public restrooms, promoting arts or sporting events that are either currently happening or could happen in the future, restoring or preserving properties that attract tourists. The one thing that the legislature says you cannot use these funds on is to construct a hotel or lodging facility. So the TDA cannot use this money to then go build a hotel. That's not allowed. And again, there's some links here. I will send these out in a follow-up email. And if you are watching this after the fact, please feel free to reach out to me and we can, I'm happy to shoot these links over to you. And with that, that's all the slides I have for now. Are there any questions by folks currently on the call that we can answer or try to answer or take down and follow up with you if I don't have an answer for now? No?
Charlie,
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question.
I have one question. Well, I think somebody unmuted. I'm gonna wait for them and then I come back. Tax, you can go before me.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the enforced collections if they don't pay. How is that process going to work?
We have not discussed that with finance yet, so that's going to be TBD.
Okay, understood.
Charlie, you mentioned that when everything passed, those who have Airbnb will have the opportunity to hit a certain button to start collecting. Is it enforced once the rule is set or it passes? Are they required to participate?
Yes. So once if the Board of Commissioners elects to levy the tax, then yes, people who are operating, I mean, in theory, and I believe that Airbnb requires you to have a business ID to operate a short-term rental on their website, right? So folks who are using these platforms already, there are mechanisms in place around tax IDs because they've got to pay sales tax already. Right. And so just like sales tax, you are legally obligated to remit your sales tax to the state of North Carolina. You would be legally obligated to collect occupancy tax. The thing that is helpful for our host is that North Carolina has an arrangement with these platforms, or it's in state statute where these facilitators, these platforms, remit it on behalf of the property owners. So in communication with Halifax County, for example, this week, they get checks from Airbnb, from Vrbo, from Expedia. They get the money sent and reports sent from those platforms themselves. So yes, hosts are required to remit it. They are required to turn it on their account, but that is the extent if they use those platforms. Now, if they're operating an Airbnb, they might post their rooms on, or not Airbnb, excuse me. They're operating a bed and breakfast, for example. They may put their rooms on Airbnb or on Vrbo, but they might take walk-ins. right, that never go through these platforms. And in that instance, as a retailer, then they would need to fill out a collections report with finance and remit it themselves. But yeah, short answer is yes, you would be legally obligated as a host to collect this. And again, if it passes, we will do some information and education outreach around the process itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions for now? Okay, well, I appreciate y'all all joining and asking your questions. I hope it was helpful. Again, we have been recording this with the idea that we will have it to share. So my goal will be to send you the links and also this recording so that if you're talking with folks later, you are able to share it with them. And again, if you have any concerns or questions, or even if you have some support for for it, please feel free to reach out. Again, public hearing is June 3rd, 2024, with the potential for the commissioners to take action at that meeting. However, it is up to them. If they want more time for consideration, then they can always table it and come back to it. All right. Thanks, y'all. Have a great day.